Hello and welcome back to KIIPSODES. I'm Adiba, the marketing director of KIPS, and today I'm joined by Caroline, who has worked in graduate recruitment at Linklaters and Hogan Lovells and was head of graduate recruitment at Overy and Norton Rose Fulbright. She is now the law careers consultant at KCL. We're also joined today by Berliana, a KCL alumna and a future trainee solicitor at Linklaters. On our episode today, Berliana and Caroline will be sharing their contrasting expertise and advice for vacation schemes and training contract applications. So, as law and non-law students all over the world are anticipating the start of application season, we here at KIPS are hoping to give students some insight into how they can make their applications stand out amongst the crowd. As graduate recruiters are reading through thousands of applications per cycle, it is crucial that our listeners utilize the correct techniques when drafting their answers to application questions, and we are aware of general timeline that law firms adopt. We are also fortunate today to be hearing from two drastically different yet equally important perspectives, one from a seasoned graduate recruiter and another from a recent graduate who has just undergone this process. Welcome to KIIPSODES, Caroline and Berliana. It's a pleasure to have you.
Very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me along.
Thank you for inviting me as well. I'm very happy to be here. I hope whatever we discuss today will be useful for your listeners.
Thank you so much for being here. So let's just get into the questions. The first question, I suppose, is better directed towards Caroline, but Berliana, please feel free to jump in. What does the application cycle of a law firm look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would treat an application cycle for a law firm. They follow the academic year for obvious reasons, because most students they are looking to recruit will still be at university, although obviously they do look for people who might be doing master's courses or career changes, or indeed have already graduated and gone on to do something a little bit different since leaving King's. But typically they're recruiting for different vacancies throughout the year. So at this time of the year, they will be looking for the firms that are recruiting for winter vacation schemes. I know that lots of deadlines have either passed or they're coming up imminently. And those schemes, because they are run in December, that's usually the priority for the law firms. Some firms are doing training contract interviews at this time of the year. That tends to have finished by now, but some might be doing that, and that might be because they're doing top-up recruitment at this time of the year. Most of all, though, what students, I suspect, listening to this have noticed is a lot of applications have either opened for vacation schemes, even for next spring and summer, or they're about to open for training contracts. So law firms will start to assess candidates, broadly speaking, for their summer and spring vacation schemes at the beginning of next calendar year. And the training contract interviews will typically be, again, in the beginning of the year, and then predominantly over the summer. So the challenging thing that students need to be aware of is that application deadlines are different for every firm. They tend to follow a similar path, but what we have noticed over the last couple of years is some of those application deadlines are much earlier than they used to be.
I would also maybe take note on the rolling and non-rolling applications. You kind of want to, focus your time on the rolling applications first, because as the name goes, kind of you want to get to be the first in line that the firms are kind of looking at. And yeah, I think you do have a few non-rolling firms like Linklaters and I think Freshfields as well. So you can kind of save that off to near the deadlines. And yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for those amazing responses. And the next general topic that I suppose is very, very important is what actually makes a successful candidate. What did the best applicants you have encountered so far all have in common?
Yeah, that is a great question, and I'll talk very broadly first, and then I'll get into sort of the things that are on an application form that stand out. I think overall, and as you said, I've worked for 4 different law firms over 20 years, so I've interviewed a lot of students and I've read a lot of application forms over the years. And the students, when I take a step back and think about those who have gone on to be successful trainees, lawyers, and even partners, these things they have in common: curiosity. They're curious about the sector. They're curious about what they will do within their career. They're not careers aren't linear. There isn't one path, and that's really important that students recognise that. And sometimes it takes a while to appreciate it, but it is true. willingness to learn. You're going to be a trainee solicitor. The clue is in the name. You're not expected to know everything. You're going to be doing a training contract. You're going to be trained. So, but you've got to be willing to learn from those people who have been doing this job much longer than you have. A thing that other students, I don't think, always recognise that, you know, they're not carbon copies of each other. Everybody brings something different to the table. So there will be unique selling points that individuals have, even if they don't think they sound very grand. Often they are, actually. You know, that makes a very important thing for a law firm to recognise. So it's recognising what you can bring to the organisation, why you're applying to that organisation. And one of the things I would encourage people to do, and this is one of the reasons why we're doing this, we do have a podcast called Let's Talk Law, where we are interviewing, I'm interviewing, the pleasure of interviewing lots of different people who have left King's and gone into different parts of the legal sector. And one thing I'd say they've all got in common is that they have taken opportunities as they've come along, they've been willing to learn, and they have had an open mind. And I think that's really important. In terms of what makes an application successful on paper, it is the basics. Spelling and grammar has to be top notch. Lawyers are trained to spot mistakes. So as a recruiter, I couldn't ever put an application form which had mistakes in or errors in front of a partner, because every student needs to realise at some level their application will get to a senior member of the team. So don't just write it for the recruiter, write it that you are going to be interviewed by a senior member of the organisation. And it needs to be tailored. And I know perhaps we'll come on to that a bit later on. I know that is really challenging, but you do need to tailor your applications as to about why you are applying to that particular firm. It's all about you. It's not about how many times you've read the Legal 500 or how many times you've read Chamber Student Guide, how many times they've been ranked tier 1 in corporate or dispute resolution. Why are you wanting to join that firm? What's attracted you?
Now on to Berliana. What was the best application that you've ever submitted to a firm, and what do you think made it the best application?
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I think it's really interesting what Caroline has said. I think, you know, my points are mainly similar to what the graduate recruitment is looking for, I guess. I don't have the best application that I've done so far, but I think some of the better applications that I've done, I would say it really does show off my individuality and my unique strengths as well. I think for me personally, one way to stand out is kind of how I came to decide that commercial law is for me. I would say, you know, I had a really difficult situation with the landlord last time, and I kind of used the principles of contract law to handle the situation. And I think firms really like to hear about that story. And so that was the spark that kind of got me going into commercial law. And then I would further cement that interest, you know, by talking about my work experiences and what I experienced during that. And that kind of made a really convincing story about why I decided that commercial law is for me. So yeah, I would also say that some of the best applications that I've done, they don't skim on the details. So I would always, you know, when giving examples, I would always go back to how and why those examples relate to me, particularly being suited to a career in that specific law firm. So it's very, very highly tailored to the firm and to myself. So just like what Caroline has said, you know, when you're mentioning deals, you have to kind of explain why the deal caught your attention. Why does it matter to me that the firm won an award for that particular deal? And yeah, so I would also say that kind of firms really do like my unique examples as well. I would, you know, talk about joining theater on a whim, or the time I had to climb a mountain in Bali for, you know, without much training. So those are the examples that really catch the eye. And yeah, I would reiterate about, you know, not having any mistakes and making sure that you check and recheck your applications. I would also say try and keep it very succinct and persuasive. A really good tip that I got was to write about 50 to 100 words extra in your applications, and then taking some time to cut down the unnecessary fluff until you reach the word limit. So I think that really made my writing very clean and easy to read. So yeah, those are some of the features of my past applications.
I think that's really interesting what you said there, Berliana.
Yeah.
What makes you different? And I think sometimes students are surprised when you don't ask them a great deal about their work experience from a legal perspective. they want to know what you're like as a person. Recruitment in a law firm is highly personalized. Partners are recruiting future partners, ideally.
Yes,
So
that's right.
they're custodians of the firm. They want to pass up on their business, and they want people who are going to contribute to continued success. And it's also that "so what" question. When I was reading application forms, I'd be like, "You're telling me this, so what?" So having that in the back of your mind, I think, is it's a check and balance, I think, for an application.
Now that, Berliana, you've spoken a lot about what made you unique to a firm, I suppose the opposite question is also very important. What made each firm that you applied to unique, like in your eyes?
Sure, yes. So I looked for firms with features that were important to me. So the firms that I liked were very international in nature. So because I've done internships with both national and international law firms, so I really found that that added layer of complexity from that international aspect of the work to be very stimulating. I found that there's a greater chance for the work to be more varied and for me to be able to encounter more novel problems. And for me personally, I believe that being international, the firm's able to remain competitive by taking advantage of a globalized economy. And also, I wanted the firm that had a very broad yet balanced offering in terms of the practice areas that they excel in. Essentially, I kind of wanted a firm that was good at everything, because my main reasoning was that I didn't know where I wanted to qualify in yet. So when I do decide, where I want to end up qualifying in, wherever it will be, that firm will still be top in class. I think that's why Linklaters highly appealed to me. It had a very stellar reputation across corporate finance and dispute resolution practices. And a majority of their practice areas are actually highly diversified, both in terms of geography and also in terms of technical expertise. And last but not least, I think culture is is a really important thing for me. As commercial lawyers, you will be spending a lot of time in the office, surrounded by colleagues. So I wanted to actually like my workplace. For example, Linklaters is generally a very diverse and inclusive law firm. And I think it provided that working environment and culture, which promotes innovation and excellence. And I think that gave me the meritocratic yet supportive environment that I need to develop both personally and professionally.
Thank you. Basically, your passion for Linklaters is so obvious. So for Caroline, in an application form where it's written, how visible is a candidate's passion for a firm? Do you have any tips for making their determination and motivation as clear as Berliana just made it right now?
I think people should listen to what Berliana said, because I think what she has done is looked at what she wants from her career, and she's matched it to what an organization can offer. And it's as simple as that. It may not feel very simple when you're going through that process. And sometimes it takes people years to, within their career, to define what's important to them. But Berliana has very clearly already worked out this is what she wants to do at this stage of her career. And that may well change. And I suspect, I'm sure you had thoughts, Berliana, about that in the future, that maybe you might be able to relocate geographically, or you might be able to, see where this career path takes you and what level it gets you to. It is difficult to show passion in writing. But again, I go back to what I said before. Always assume that application was going to get you to an interview, because what you get at an interview is the opportunity to go beyond what you've said. And quite often it's, they're wanting to see the tone, or hear the tone of your voice, your engagement, your eye contact, your body language, over screen or in person. How excited do they seem about the potential of joining an organization? So I think it is difficult on paper, but you have to get the basics right to get you to that stage. I would question anyone who says, I've wanted to be a lawyer since the age of 5. I really, I think I've been to so many partners over the years. Yeah, exactly. Who've sort of thought, really? And I've heard partners challenge candidates about that in an interview. You might have a perception of what a lawyer is back then, but there's no way you could have done that until you've actually spoken to people at the firms you're interested in, done your research, And then, that's when practice interviews can really help to get you ready for how you get across, not just about why you want to be a lawyer. And you are going to get asked that question, by the way, guys. So you're going to get asked these questions. Why do you want to be a lawyer? Why do you want to work for these firms? And they are often the questions you've thought about most. They sound wonderful in your head, but until you actually speak them, you don't know how that's going to come across. So that is part of the process of preparing for an interview. And that's why practice interviews are so valuable, I think.
Thank you. And this is a question that for Berliana that I'm so interested in personally, because I myself am in the process of applying for training contracts and vacation schemes. How should a student manage their time between studying and applying?
I mean, yes, it was very difficult. It was a huge struggle. I mean, it's not even just, applying and studying at the same time. I think I can speak for most of the listeners here that you have a lot of societies and other extracurricular responsibilities that you have to get to as well. To keep organized for my applications, I usually keep like an application spreadsheet with, all the deadlines, because as Caroline said, we have a lot of different deadlines for different firms, and you don't know if they're rolling or non-rolling. So it's very easy to lose track if you don't have it in a spreadsheet. And I would also add another column for a specific date. It's like a self-imposed deadline for which I should send off my applications. And I would also try and dedicate kind of a time period that's specifically for writing applications, so as to keep myself disciplined. My brain works best at night, so I usually do my applications for about 2 hours after dinner, and yeah, just try to keep to that schedule throughout the application season. And I also didn't wait until application season started. I took some time off during the summer break to kind of start on the applications, because I knew that term time was going to be super hectic, especially for second and third years. And I think the hardest period of time would probably be during interview season. I would say that it would make your life much, much easier if you get into the habit of reading commercial news, and keeping up to date with what's going on in the commercial world from now on. Act as if you're getting an interview invite tomorrow. Because it's very difficult to cram all of your preparations within that very short time frame that you get before that interview. And I would also try and make use of your travel time to practice competencies questions, or kind of read up on newspapers, or listen to podcasts. As for tutorial readings, if you can afford to, kind of use the weekend to cram about a week's worth of tutorial preparation when you do get an invite for your assessment center, so that you can spend the week to prepare for your assessment, of course. Otherwise, I found it really helpful to kind of split readings with your friends, and then just come back to the text when you have a bit more time.
So thank you for your answer. This is a question for both of you. How important is it for an applicant to have their desired practice area set in stone? Berliana, I know that you still haven't decided your practice area yet, but was that a little bit more difficult, like because you didn't have a specific area you didn't want to talk about? Or was it like very, very easy to basically just say that, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with my career yet?
So this was a common worry that I had as well. But I've talked to a lot of kind of senior lawyers and HR team as well, and it's definitely not necessary to have one set in stone. In fact, it's probably strange if you do have one set in stone, with only very minimal exposure to it. And in fact, those senior lawyers that I talked to, a lot of them thought they were going to qualify in one practice area, but after they underwent their training contract, they decided to qualify in a completely different practice area. So it's really okay if you don't have one set in stone yet. However, I think it would be useful to mention still, if you are genuinely interested and if the firm excels in it. In fact, I was quite interested in energy and infrastructure, and I talked a lot about that during my interviews. you do have to specify why you're interested in it with very concrete examples. So if you do have work experience or if you've done your own personal research, kind of talk about that. And I think make sure that when you do kind of specify a practice area that you're interested in, make sure that you don't seem too close-minded. Say that you're eager to explore your interest in that specific practice area, but you're also keen to kind of dip your toes in others.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's just been said. And I think that law firms, a lot of law firms these days have gifted candidates something which perhaps they're not aware of. So I'll explain what I mean. Yes, there are practice areas, but most law firms now go to market to get clients. They don't go and say we're the best corporate lawyers in the world. They go and say, as Berliana said, we are energy experts. If you're an energy company or you're in that market, we know the industry you're in. So come to us for anything that you're worried about, whether it's a merger or acquisition, whether it's a dispute, whether it's a regulatory issue. So if you've got an interest in the sector that a law firm talks about, and many of them, they have them listed on their websites, that's a way round, I think, being worried that if I go to this particular firm, I don't know how I'm going to talk about that I want to do private equity work. And I think Berliana is absolutely right to say, most lawyers that I know over the years, and I've known quite a few, there are always exceptions, but most don't really end up in the area that they thought they were going to. And that's the beauty of a vacation scheme and a training contract. So on a vacation scheme, you're usually asked for where would you ideally like to sit. You may not get that choice. And do you know what? If you don't, you've got to suck it up and just get on with it and show that you're open to finding out more. Because if you don't actually sit in that department for part of that vacation scheme, it doesn't mean to say that's closed off from you. You could still talk to people from that department. It just might mean that they haven't had capacity to have you physically sit in that department. Likewise with the training contract. So you have to go in with a very open mind, and that's why graduate recruitment teams, and I've been part of this side at some of the firms I've worked at, have HR teams dedicated to training solicitors. So they will support you through what is a very challenging 2 years. And guess what? At some point in it, you might be asked to go to client secondment that you hadn't factored into your planning. And I have had many conversations. I've sat opposite someone saying, it's really not the end of the world. This is 6 months of your life. And actually, guess what? 9 times out of 10, they come back and they've had the most amazing experience. And it quite often takes their career in a different direction that they hadn't anticipated. So I go back to that, having that, don't assume your career is linear. Now, last thing I'll say on this, there are some firms out there, and I'm thinking about the US firms in particular, where they have very, very strong corporate teams, private equity teams. If you are very focused on an area like that, and you're applying to a firm like that, then I would argue that you really should be have a genuine interest and talking about it on an application form. But the likes of Linklaters, Herbert Smith Freehill, Hogan Lovells, A&O, some of the firms I've worked for, they have very broad practice areas, and people choose them because they know that their career could end up taking them in different directions. So being open-minded, I really haven't ever met somebody who knows they want to be an asset finance lawyer at the beginning of their LPC or SQE. I just haven't. And that's to be embraced, not fought against, to be perfectly honest with you, because if you fight against it, that's not going to do you any good with the people that ideally you want to offer you a job at the end of it, because they're looking to see how you're coping with sometimes disappointment, because it happens in everyone's careers, having to get over challenging situations. We don't just want to see how you've done that at university. Guess what? It goes throughout your whole career as well.
Yeah, that's a really good shout about US firms, actually, Caroline. Now that I think about it, I've heard a lot of horror stories about, whole interviews just done about private equity, and the person just, the interviewee just didn't prepare for it. So yeah, I think if you are going for a US firm interview, really to brush up on your private equity.
Well, I think also, if you're saying you're really interested in the practice area, you've got to know about it, because and likewise, if you quote a deal on an application form, and you can, I have sat in interviews when the lead partner who led that acquisition or that deal has been interviewing the candidate. And of course, they're going to latch onto it. They're not going to expect you to know everything. But I always say, don't put something on an application form that you're not willing to talk about, and have some depth of knowledge.
Yeah, definitely review your applications like front to back when you go for interviews, guys.
Absolutely.
Those are extremely informative answers. Thank you again. This question is for Berliana. Aptitude tests like the Watson Glaser test are a significant component of securing internships or vacation schemes or training contracts at law firms. Could you introduce what these are to our viewers and also tell us how you went about preparing for them?
Yeah, sure. So the Watson Glaser is basically an online critical thinking assessment, which kind of tests some of the most, fundamental skills that you will need as a lawyer. And I believe that it's usually split into 5 sections. So you'll likely be tested on your inference skills, your ability to recognize assumptions, deduction skills, evaluation skills, and interpretation skills. So with Watson Glaser, you really can't go wrong with practice makes perfect. I think you just need to familiarize yourselves with what exactly each section of the test wants. So with that in mind, I would highly suggest the practice tests that come for free online. I think you can find it on job test preps, assessment days, and I think nowadays some law firms have their own free ones as well. If I remember correctly, it's Clifford Chance, CMS, and a lot of other firms. I also found this particular book quite useful during my preparation. It's titled Critical Thinking Skills by How to Become, and it's on Amazon for cheap. I think the book does amazing in explaining those concepts to you, so that you know full well what you're looking for when you're answering the questions. And they have lots of practice assessments, and with a very comprehensive answers key as well.
Now, from a recruitment perspective, how does the Watson Glaser test and all these other situational judgment tests fit in with the rest of an applicant's application?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, just to add to what Berliana said about practice tests, King's holds licenses for pretty much all the psychometric tests you're likely to come across in any sector that you're going for. So you could go onto our KIIPS pages and you can access practice psychometric tests for Watson Glaser. So that's all there for you for free. So the reason, I think it's important to realise why firms have brought psychometric testing into application processes. And it's there for 2 reasons. One, it's to reduce bias. And it's also to introduce, I should say the same thing, but to introduce an objective measure linked to what you're going to need to do on the job. So Watson Glaser, it's a tough test. It's used, it never used to be used as widely in the legal sector. It is very commonplace now. And it's been brought in because it is testing, as Berliana said, those skills that you will need to do, need to demonstrate and use on a day-to-day basis. Watson Glaser, and I'm trained in it from a psychometric testing perspective, you need to finish it to get a good score. So it's not one of those tests that you can leave and think, well, if they're all right, and I haven't, ones I haven't answered isn't going to affect my score. Well, it will affect your score. So it's it's a test of speed as well, and getting through a test as well. But firms will approach, and again, this is the challenging thing. So I'd almost encourage you, focus on each part of the assessment process. Don't sit back and try and work out, if I got this score in it, this is going to get me through to the next stage. Because guess what? You're never going to know. A law firm will never tell you what their cutoff point is. And they'll never tell you quite how they are using the test. Although we do know that some people will have to do the test when they submit their application, and that will be looked at in the round. Some people do it as part of an assessment centre where they're doing lots of other different things at the same time. And again, my experience as a recruiter, you're looking at everything in the round. Some people are using it as a way of rejecting candidates, and that may sound very harsh, but it's like the banks and the accountancy firms do it as well. So it's a way of getting to the candidates they really want to see. So I would just encourage you, though, not to get yourself worried about how many people are going to get put through for interview, how many people are going to get through to Watson Glaser, what score do I need to get? You will never know the answers, and it will drive you mad if you try and work it all out. And I used to say that when I had vacation students that I was hosting, they would say to me, how many of us are going to get offers at the end of it? What's your quota? And my response was, and it was always true, if you all do well, you'll all get offers. Don't compete against each other. This is your career journey. Own your own career journey. Don't worry about what your best friend or your colleague or your classmate has done or hasn't done. Guess what? They may not tell you everything anyway. You'll only hear the good news, not the bad news. So it's really important to try and get rid of that noise, because it's stressful enough, as Berliana said, when you're going through this process. But I appreciate that is hard when you're seeing people on a day-to-day basis. But assessment centres, you can't second guess what the firm is looking for. Just know that they bring those tests in for very good reasons.
Thank you so much for both of your responses. To finish off today, we'd like to talk about the importance of maintaining good mental health and well-being throughout this entire very stressful process. So applications are very stressful, and many people find the uncertainty of the future extremely daunting. What word of advice would you give to students that are currently finding themselves in this position? And also, how are you implementing these practices in your own life?
I think I know firsthand how stressful that can get, especially since you don't really hear about the failures. You only hear about the successes, especially on LinkedIn. You know, it gets super overwhelming sometimes. So I think it's really important for you to find a community of people that understands what you're going through and who won't judge you on your failures, you know, and are able to share tips and tricks on how to, you know, survive the application cycle season. I found it really helpful actually to go on the TCLA forum. For me, that was a really helpful forum with people who are generally very supportive, and they would also give, you know, a lot of different tips on and specific advice on, you know, the interviews and assessment centers that are going on in the firms itself. So yes, I would also say that it's not a race. You know, some of us take a little more time to decide what we want to do in our lives, and that's perfectly fine. You know, keep at it. We're all cheering for you. And I think it's also important, you know, to take some time out for yourself if you need to. Find some way to, you know, relieve stress. I do yoga, so you could maybe go on daily walks or just find a hobby that, you know, that is not law, so you can take your mind off things for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything you said there. I think also enjoy your time at university. You're never going to get this time back again. You'll never get this, for it doesn't seem this way, but you'll never get the amount of time back that you've got now. So embrace the fact that you're all now back on campus, which is just fantastic to see. Get involved in things that you're interested in. You know, join societies, go to the baking society. I don't know, anything that you find that's going to help you to switch off from your studies, to switch off from the noise that I've spoken about. It's really important. And also, you know, I would say this because I'm here from the careers team, but do use us. We are a neutral sounding board. When people are thinking, how am I going to get this job? I'm feeling totally overwhelmed. I've got, you know, things going on in my degree and I'm finding it difficult to juggle. And on occasion, I've said to people, I'm not sure you're in the right headspace to be applying for jobs at the moment. And that's actually what they want. You know, they wanted me to say that, but they didn't know they wanted me to say that. So, you know, the good thing, I was reminded by somebody the other day who was actually a partner at Norton Rose Fulbright. Guess what? The law sector is a great sector in the sense that there are jobs every year. So it's not like you're going to miss out if you don't get a training contract this year. You know, you can have another chance to get to the right place for you. And the careers team is also here for you 2 years after you leave King's. So we're here throughout your whole journey. And I am supporting people at the moment who are going through the rounds of applying for very different types of jobs within the law. And sometimes a bit of adversity and a bit of challenge, if it does take you a while, can make you a better candidate. You know, law firms like that. They like to see people who have had to work through challenges as well. There's so much support at King's, perhaps more than people realise, to support you with mental health. It's World Mental Health Day tomorrow. We're doing this on Saturday, the 9th of October. World Mental Health Day is tomorrow. You know, check in with friends, be a good colleague, be a good friend, and, you know, be realistic about what you can commit to. Your tutors will expect you to be committed and not let your studies slip, and that's important actually to get that balance. But do something that you enjoy. I do Pilates once a week. I love that. I go for walks. I try and just put myself back in the moment and think, okay, what do I need to do today? If I didn't do this today, is it the end of the world? And often the response is no, it's not actually. And Berliana has given you some amazing tips today when it comes to knowing when to apply for jobs. Be organised, get that spreadsheet going. take ownership of that, and give yourself your own deadlines before the real deadlines come along. Just embrace all the support you get at King's, I would say, and the mental health services are there for you as well if you do need to access them.
I definitely would recommend the King's Career Services. I actually went to them during one of my lowest points, and yeah, the advice that I was given was really amazing and really useful. I even went to them for, practice interviews, for
Great, that's great to hear.
psychometric tests and all that. So yeah, definitely recommend the service, guys.
Thank you, Caroline and Berliana, for coming on and sharing this incredible insight into applications just in time for the next cycle.
Well, that's our pleasure. I hope it's been useful. And I said, listen to what Berliana's told you guys. She sounds like she's been very well organized and she's been successful. So she's a good person to listen to.
Thank you so much for having me here. And Caroline, it was such a pleasure to be with you today.
Likewise.
If you're interested in learning more about Caroline and Berliana, we'll have their LinkedIns linked to the description of this episode, which will give you an opportunity to see their career journeys in detail and reach out to them personally. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and be sure to follow our KIIPS social media for updates on what we're doing. All our links are in the description box below, and we would love to hear from you. This has been another episode of KIIPSODES.